Welcome to today's webinar where we're going to talk about PropelZ with VSE. And I'm Dustin Froyum. I'm one of the co-founders of VirtualZ Computing. And today I have Vince Ray from VirtualZ as well, co-founder and our CTO. And we're super excited to have our friends in the mainframe world, Brittney Painter, who is from 21st Century Software and is the VSE Customer Success Manager. And we also have Gonzalo Serrano, who is the VP for VSEn Business. So welcome, Brittney and Gonzalo as well.
Thank you for having us.
So this is being recorded and will be available for playback on our YouTube channel, as well as our podcast, which is called Skyward Data, and that's available on any of the podcasting networks or solutions. We're going to talk a little bit about the challenge with AI data access, PropelZ overall, and the architecture and the functional overview. And we'll touch on just how that integrates or can leverage the VSE operating system. And then we'll get a little bit deeper into the perspective of what's going on with VSE and 21st Century Software. Talk through a little bit of the use cases, the pricing for PropelZ multi-platform, and if there's any time for some Q&A and conclusion. All right, so these will be pretty familiar for anyone that's operated in the mainframe world for a while. So you have legacy kind of ETL and data access challenges around being really our data siloed because of the different formats and doesn't necessarily talk very well unless you have really a common database per se. But if you have other data formats like VSAM, other flat files, or other proprietary mainframe databases, that can be really challenging to unify your data, especially in the today in the world of AI and data lakes, and you're trying to get that universal view and keep that data very currently when you're making decisions using your BI and AI platforms. That data integration can be costly. It can take MIPS in your general processing environment to bring that data together, create output or files. It can also be very challenging to have manual processes. And those were a lot of times out of necessity because there wasn't commercially available products to get the data access that you needed. And so that could slow down your integration and that data availability, as well as taking up valuable mainframe resources or other resources in your other environments as well. And obviously, the data transformation could also be costly and challenging when you're moving from, mainframe-based data sets to, your ASCII, JSON, other cloud databases and formats. And so at VirtualZ, we really set out to really solve a lot of those challenges around any of your data access or data integration needs across our product set. And so and to do that with really no code, yes, configuration, but no code, nothing you have to maintain, commercially available, easy to install, easy to set up and be operational in, hours or days, not weeks and months, and sometimes years. We hear those stories of trying to implement some of these products. So we'll get deeper into how those types of things work. But first, Vince, I'm going to ask you to just talk a little bit about the overall architecture and functionality of PropelZ, which we're focusing on today.
Yeah, no, happy to do that. And the way I always think of PropelZ is that it's really three separate parts. There's an input stage, which is all about how do I access whatever type of data I need on. Traditionally on ZOS, this could be VSAM files, this could be really almost anything. It could be management data, it could be database records, it could be all sorts of different diverse data there. So the input stage is all about how do I connect to my data and understand it that way. Kind of in the middle, we have, I guess I'd call it the transformation stage. I mean, when you described what folks go through on other platforms, it's really two big problems. One is a connectivity issue. I can't go out and read a VSAM file from, let's say a cloud application. But the second part of the problem is even if I could do that, I probably wouldn't understand the data. That data is probably, if it's text, it's probably EBCDIC or, God knows what code page. If it's And usually with, especially things like VSAM files, you have all kinds of complexity there. You might have packed decimal data, you might have mainframe format floating points, you might have bit fields, binary fields, all sorts of different things. So just understanding that data is a challenge, even if you had connectivity to it. So that's what goes on in the kind of heart of PropelZ. We're able to take a little bit of metadata that describes what your records look like and then transform them into standardized formats. That could be XML, that could be JSON, that could be a CSV file. Really, it could be anything that you ultimately want to deal with. Typically, and I guess this leads me to the output stage. Typically, the output stage is a database of some sort. We don't necessarily want to take a bunch of data, turn it into JSON objects, and then you got to figure out how do I get that JSON object into whatever database I want. We have the ability to talk to just about any database through a JDBC interface. So, in that case, you could think of that transformation stage in the middle as being, how do I convert your data into rows and columns so that it could be populated into a table and an AWS database, an Oracle database, whatever target you have in mind. We're totally open-ended in terms of the targets that we can support. And although probably the most common thing is JDBC, it doesn't have to be JDBC. One example that we use, and there's a video about this where you can see it end to end. We take mainframe management data in the form of console messages. We transform it into JSON objects, and then we take those objects and push them through a proprietary API and land that data directly in Splunk. So you're able to use Splunk to see and manipulate all of that management data from a ZOS system. So, perfect example, the data could be anything, the output could be anything. And as I said, the most common use cases probably aren't that. The most common use cases are probably things like VSAM to an Oracle database or a Snowflake database because you're driving an AI app with it. But really, the sky is the limit. And, just relevant to our discussion today, historically, what I'm talking about's been self-contained on ZOS. So PropelZ has had low-level logic to manipulate ZOS files and on and on and on that way. But one of the recent changes we made is we created a platform neutral version of PropelZ where you can run the pieces that I'm talking about really anywhere that you have a Java environment. So it could be Linux, could be Windows, it could be just about any platform with a Java implementation will work. The related part of that, though, is because of the openness around the input and output stages. It means that for the first time, you could run PropelZ on, let's say, an Intel Linux platform and connect the input stage to, let's say, a VSE platform, or some environment where maybe you don't even have a Java environment. There are many ways of doing that. File transfer is one possibility. If there are remote APIs that can be used to read files, that's another possibility. Some platforms have things like NFS built in. We can certainly consume data that way too. So it kind of creates this, run PropelZ wherever you want to run it, and then connect to the data wherever the data happens to be using whatever technique is appropriate for that data. All right. Well, Dusty, what did we forget to cover? Is there anything we should touch on?
Yeah, I got a couple questions, Vince. So, really, we're kind of launching PropelZ multi-platform here, and specifically talking about VSE. I know in other webinars we've talked a lot about kind of the install experience. Can you just talk about what the install may be like on one of the multi-platform version of PropelZ?
Yeah, well, at least today, I'll just pick on Linux. The packaging is the same as what we're doing on ZOS today. So basically, we give you a compressed archive, you expand it into a directory on wherever you want to run. You make sure you have a Java environment available to it, and literally that's it. I mean, there's certainly some configuration data. There's settings, and where am I going to connect, and what security do I use, and certainly all of that. But the basic software installation is pretty straightforward. Now, I'm sure in the in fullness of time, our customers, especially Windows and Linux customers, are going to expect it to be packaged to kind of the standards on their platform. So, the Windows installer or one of the package managers on Linux, definitely that's a roadmap item for us, and that'll make it even easier. On a lot of Linux systems, you just do an RPM command if you're on Red Hat, or an APT command on lots of other platforms, and 10 seconds later, literally, your copy of PropelZ is up and running. So yeah, we intend to keep it as simple as humanly possible that way. Some of the competing products in this space, it seems like you could spend a week trying to get them installed and running, and that's not really where we want people spending their time.
Or 2 years, right, Vince?
Or 2 years, and
We hear that story, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we
And
did hear that.
never get it installed and configured. Yeah, that's unfortunate. So yeah, so that's great. It's a very similar experience. You're talking about minutes and maybe hours at the very most, to be fully configured and pushing data from your source to your target. Vince, do you want to say anything else about kind of the targets and how that works and performance before we kind of move on?
Yeah, I mean well, a couple of things. I mean, the targets are, as I mentioned, the most common thing there is JDBC. We support 5 databases out of the box. I would think of them as certified. In other words, you don't have to think about it. You can just select one of those and they'll work with no real serious configuration or anything. The 5 we support are MySQL, Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle, Snowflake, and Postgres. So, if you're on one of those, and they're of course all industry leaders, then there's very little work to do. But PropelZ is open enough. You can specify, you can use the JDBC drivers that we supply. You can provide your own. If you provide your own, you can configure it any way you want to. So the connection settings, the how do I do encryption, and on and on and on. Whatever the database target supports, you can leverage in PropelZ. And then the other side of that is remember, ultimately we're going to rows and columns in a database table here. So when it comes to some of the structure of that, you can also influence that. We give you, I think of them as skeletons that control the SQL processing that we do. So, you want a different, I don't know, different indexing than we would normally do. You're free to do that. If you want to change the column names or even the data types, we see mainframe, let's say a floating point number. Maybe you don't want to store it as a float on your target database. Maybe you want to store it as a character value. I don't know. You get the ability to control all of that just by changing our configuration data. There's nothing in PropelZ that requires coding in any way, and that's kind of what makes it so efficient to do. The other thing that's really important to understand is it's not an all or nothing thing. I can configure PropelZ for my use case, and then someone else right on that same system can use PropelZ in a completely different way, completely different data, completely different targets. And we see this a lot. We see a lot of times there'll be, like, I don't know, production workloads that are creating files that need to be stored in, let's say an Oracle database, but then there's an ad hoc user that wants to take that same information and put it in Snowflake because he's working on some kind of, AI application with that data. So it's case by case like that. It can be, scheduled and very controlled. It can also be very ad hoc depending what your needs are. And it's not so technical that you need, programming skill to do it. I mean, we hear a lot, especially on the mainframe platforms, we hear, geez, I don't have those skills too much anymore. So PropelZ is the kind of thing that, just about anybody could pick it up and figure out how to get data where they need it to go. Anyway, I'm rambling too much, Dusty.
No, that's good. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we kind of, pointed that piece out. I know you talked a little bit about the streaming, the Splunk. There's two great demos that are already published out on our website, virtualzcomputing.com, or on our YouTube channel, and you can see one going to a MySQL database, and then the data being presented in Tableau, kind of start to finish. I think that demo is about 8 or 9 minutes, and it's, real elapsed time, right, Vince, was somewhere around, 45 or 30 minutes, right, install to pushing the data to, presenting that data. And then the other demo is really that real-time streaming that Vince talked about, coming out of ZOS, in this case, into Splunk. But those are two great demos. And then, Vince, I know you have some other demos kind of highlighting the multi-platform piece kind of on your agenda for the future. So keep an eye out for those.
I'm sure that'll be a subsequent webinar someplace.
Yeah, I'm sure it will, knowing how prolific we are. So, all right. So Brittney and Gonzalo, why don't you just give us a little update about 21st Century and VSE, and anything else you wanted to kind of share for the VSE customers listening to this?
Sure. We're very excited. We have our 6.4 is actually coming out tomorrow. 21CS has taken over VSE. So we have a strong partnership with IBM, and so to continue that partnership, we have taken over the stewardship of VSE, and it is now VSEn. So we are continuing that evolution of that wonderful platform, and in doing so, our newest release, the 6.4, is actually going to be available tomorrow. So we're really excited for that. Lots of enhancements to the stack, a lot of customer support. So we're kind of rallying the community behind us, but we're excited to get some of those modernization options, and just really continue the platform in a positive direction, and take advantage of the newest technologies that's coming forth. But we're really excited to be a part of this. So thank you for including us.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we're certainly, we have been asked about VSE. We didn't have anything to offer at the point, and we were kind of focused on some other things. And so we're really excited to have an opportunity to improve data access and data integration for the VSE operating system here going forward, and working with 21CS. So, all right, Gonzalo, anything else you wanted to kind of share before I kind of tie into some of the use cases and pricing of PropelZ overall?
Maybe just very briefly, what Brittney said, we are investing in very young employees. Brittney is one of the examples. She just started in the mainframe a couple months ago. And again, this is for the generations to come. So that's what we call it VSEn, for the next generation. And it's very important because the customer workloads are there to stay. And although sometimes some customers are trying to migrate somewhere else, migrations are very difficult, and that's the reason why we decided, when customers wanted to move from IBM Z VSE to VSEn, to make a very easy transition. So we support this FSU so that it can be a fast service upgrade, and it's very easy migration. If you need any help, feel free to contact us, and we hope with solutions like what PropelZ is offering, that it will be even more interesting for VSE customers.
Yeah, and we'll be sure to tee up your contact information here at the end. I'll ask you to do that for us at the close here as well. Okay, so we've touched on a little bit of this, but just a few other use cases around PropelZ. So actually, we just had a customer we've been working with for a long time. They're ready to do a final migration and cutover, and so talking about how we really help them make that final data movement over time as they move into their cloud processing environment more permanently, but still have access to that data. Both kind of in its native historical format in blobs, so we can store that data in blobs as well as do the conversion into rows and columns or whatever target they want that Vince outlined for us. There's some customers working on report migration, so they're doing legacy SAS and easy tree reporting, and want to do some integration to more of their modern cloud-based platforms across all of their operating environments. And so how do we help them with their report migration as well and that data access? So we have both VSAM to DB2 conversions and DB2 to other platform conversions that have come up, and I'll talk a little bit about that pricing. We do have we can take the input on the DB2 side as well and push that to like a Databricks or Snowflake. That's the one that's coming up in particular customers, or again, that's really flexible into what those targets can be. We have tape migration use cases. Again, some of those customers want to access that data in its native format, and we can help them do that, or actually convert that data to be accessible off of tape. And some of them, it's just purely a storage play, so that they get off of physical degrading magnetic media. They're not having to buy additional VTL platforms, or maybe they want a third or fourth site that doesn't have a mainframe in it. So those are really typical ones that are coming up as well. Then just storage on like VSAM, DB2 logs, those types of things. So it's really flexible in what we can do and where we can push this data to. So and we'd love to hear if you have other use cases. Our customers always surprise us with what they want to do, and so we love talking through those and some of those challenges. So what does PropelZ cost? So PropelZ is $50,000 per year per enterprise, and that's per OS. So for instance, if you're running ZOS and VSE, right, that's two different OSs, and so that'd be $100,000. But it's unlimited for the amount of data, the amount of installs, the instances. That is the true fixed cost, and that comes with those 5 drivers that Vince mentioned. If you have an additional driver you want us to test and certify for you, we're glad to do that, and that's we'll quote you a price on that, and it's nothing really exorbitant. I think the maximum we've had is 10,000 or 15,000 for just a JDBC driver, and that was a kind of a complex situation. And then if you want the out of the box Splunk connector, then that's 25,000. The DB2 connector we've talked about, if you want that, that's the input side, not the output side. The input side, that's also something like 25,000. Again, there's no scalability to that cost. That is your fixed annual cost. It includes your maintenance and support as well. I'll just mention, we have four products that can cover just about any data access, data storage challenge that you have in the mainframe. We have demos of each one of these products. Flows being the newest one, which gives you really a no-code, easy backup and data sharing solution. That's a little bit different than PropelZ. It's more file-based versus pushing it out into a relational database or an observability platform. So that's a really great solution. And we just did a webinar for our EU customers on DORA compliance, and Flows is a great solution for that. And then if you need real-time read-write access and your mainframe is your continue to be your system of record, Lozen is the great one for that. And I know, Vince, you've got some really great things coming up with it, Agenic and Gen AI kind of on the horizon as well. But Lozen can integrate with that today. So if you've got Agenic AI that you want to do with real-time read-write access and present that outside of the mainframe, that's a great solution with very, very high security. And ZAC is the higher order storage solution where you have can operate in both virtual tape and virtual disk mode. So very, very unique offering. And patents across, these are very unique offerings, like I said, and patents across this entire portfolio or applications across this entire portfolio. I already mentioned we got some additional resources. We got blogs on everything, the demos on demand, the podcast we've covered. We'd love to see you at some upcoming events. We'll be at AWS reInvent at the end of November, beginning of December. So we'd love to see you there. YouTube as well. We have all of our webinars published there, so you can watch some of these videos. But we have other resources too, like self-directed learning right on our website, and some thought leadership papers as well. So we'd love to hear from you. If you want to test, we offer no cost evals. You can reach out to us at hello@virtualzcomputing.com or on our web form on our website. And so, Brittney and Gonzalo, how do we get a hold of you?
Email. You can email me at Brittney Painter, Brittney Painter, just my name.
No dots, no dots?
No dots,
Okay.
sorry. At 21cs.com. So you can look me up at LinkedIn. Any way you can find me, you can get a hold of me.
All right. Gonzalo,
And
no
you can
dots?
reach me, yes, in my case is gonzalo.muelas@21cs.com. Or is that very hard to remember, then the easy one is VSE@21cs.com. That will get to our ways as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We always love to have our Mainframe colleagues join us for some of these events, and hope everyone has a great rest of your day, and we'll catch you on the next one.